Voice control, the hands-free future that decades of science fiction movies told us we needed.
Good evening, Dave.
How you doing, Hal?
Well, we got it, for better or for worse.
Look at purple suitcase.
The save point. Okay.
No!
Yeah, it may not always work as intended, but video games had to walk so that Alexa and Siri could run. From around 2000 to 2010, voice control was the new hotness in the gaming sphere, with something coming out in virtually every genre that allowed you to ditch your controller and instead use a microphone to yell at the virtual characters in your TV. So strap on your headsets and dust off your Kinects, because today we're going to take a look at gaming's history with your voice, as well as some of the more notable games that took advantage of the often forgotten feature. Hey, it's Travis, and welcome to Game Rats. Voice control was one of those gaming fads that no one really asked for. It just kind of showed up for a couple of years and then it was gone. But was it just a gimmick, or did it actually have anything to offer of substance? That's what we're here to find out, starting with voice control's history with gaming. And it began much earlier than you might think. It may seem like a new concept, but voice recognition has actually been around for almost 50 years, dating back to 1973. Voice chess was the first video game to use your voice as a controller, by allowing you to speak which position you wanted your chess piece to move to. It was basic stuff, but the technology continued to evolve into the 80s with devices like the Kovacs Voice Master for the Commodore 64, Apple II, and Atari 800. The Kovacs was a device that allowed for simple speech input and digitized speech. It was primitive, but it worked. On the console side of things, Nintendo was the first company to take the vocal plunge by hardwiring a microphone into the second controller port of the Famicom in 1983. The controller's microphone was rarely utilized, but it is most famously remembered for the Japanese version of The Legend of Zelda, where the only way to defeat Pols Voice was by yelling into your controller.
Yo!
The microphone feature never made it into the NES, so stateside players would instead shoot the beastie with arrows. Some more mid-80s peripherals like the Atari Voice Commander were developed but never actually made it to market. After the Voice Commander's cancellation and the poor reception of several other vocal recognition devices, the whole concept of voice control fell off the grid for a bit until the 90s, when it began to re-emerge stronger than ever before. With stuff like the now infamous Konami Laser Scope in 1991.
Fire! 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 Fire!
And later, the first commercial video game with voice control, Command Aces of the Deep, released on PC in 1995. Command allowed you to bark orders at your virtual submarine crew with its optional voice recognition mode. After Command Aces of the Deep, two console games released that were the true spark that lit the fuse on the impending voice control boom. 1998's Hey You Pikachu on the Nintendo 64 and 99's Seaman on the Dreamcast. I know both of these games have already been covered to death on YouTube, so I'll try not to spend too much time with them, but they're too important not to mention. After the Pokemon craze took the world by storm on the Game Boy, Nintendo needed to capitalize on the series' popularity on their other system, the N64. No mainline Pokemon games were released for the 64, but several spin-offs were. Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, Pokemon Puzzle League, and last but least, Hey You Pikachu. Starring the titular electric rat, Hey You Pikachu is essentially a collection of minigames that require you to speak to Pikachu with the N64 microphone attachment. I don't have an N64 mic, so I haven't played it for myself, but the general consensus seems to be that Pikachu rarely understands anything you say to him.
Hello? Anybody home?
Which makes for a frustrating, brain-dead experience. However, the game was a console pioneer for voice control, so you kinda have to cut it some slack for that. And it did come bundled with the Pikachu N64, so that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, just not as cool as Seaman. After you wade through the initial shock of its bizarre presentation, Seaman is at its core a virtual pet simulator. In the game, you are the proud owner of a man-fish hybrid who requires your daily attention in order to survive. When you're not busy adjusting the temperature of his aquarium or feeding him fish pellets, you'll spend your time chatting with Seaman using your Dreamcast microphone. As you learn more about Seaman, he learns more about you, stuff like your age, gender, and if you have self-esteem issues.
In general, would you describe yourself as a confident person?
Seaman may be a bit of an asshole, but there is still something to love about the ugly little guy. It's not perfect, but for the most part, Seaman does a good job of understanding what you say to him. It was impressive back in '99, and it still is today. The game even got a Japan-only sequel in Seaman 2 on the PS2. This time, you care for a tiny little caveman instead of the freakish manfish. After Hey You Pikachu and Seaman, there's words I never thought I'd say together, the voice control floodgates were truly open. Now, no genre was safe from the feature, and it was most commonly used in karaoke rhythm games. Unlike the games we discussed before that took your voice and translated it into a specific command, these games were a bit simpler, in that they didn't actually understand any of your words or commands. Instead, they turned your living room into a dingy dive bar by simply using your voice to detect rhythm and pitch.
Tequila.
SingStar, Rock Band, Guitar Hero, Karaoke Revolution, High School Musical, Def Jam Rap Star. Ugh, listen, there were a ton of these things released between 2003 and 2010. Over 120 to be precise. And they're still coming out today. I could go on listing them for the rest of this video, but no one wants that. Even though I do still love to boot up Rock Band from time to time, let's shift focus to some other games that use voice in a bit more of a unique way. Like SOCOM US Navy SEALs, released on the mighty PS2 in 2002. This dearly missed PlayStation franchise originally came packaged with a USB headset. The headset was primarily for online chat in the game's multiplayer mode, but tearing a page out of Command Aces of the Deep's playbook, you could also use it to verbally order your squad of Navy SEALs in the game's campaign.
I'll take it from here.
The phrases available to use are limited, but they work well. At the time, it presented a unique dynamic that helped to add to the tactical immersion of the game. SOCOM's vocal influence spread to other tactical shooters of the time: Rainbow Six 3, Ghost Recon, SWAT, and the real-time strategy game Tom Clancy's EndWar in 2008.
Unit 1 cleared to attack Hostile 1.
EndWar expands on the simple SOCOM voice command system of ordering your squad and instead raises the stakes and gives you dozens of units to command. With so many units at your disposal, you'll have to talk to yourself more than any psychologist would likely deem healthy.
See, here I am now by myself, talking to myself.
Your controller handles the majority of your unit actions. Stuff like using a scope, moving to cover, boarding a transport vehicle, or garrisoning a building.
Unit 2, move to Sierra.
Voice commands, on the other hand, are reserved for specific actions, like telling a specific unit to attack a specific enemy, or ordering your units to retreat to cover when they're overwhelmed. EndWar makes some good use of the feature, but the game itself is kinda mundane. I felt like I was watching a movie rather than playing a game, which is kinda the gist of the RTS genre anyway, only EndWar is somehow a much more passive experience than those other games. Anyway, that's enough tactical games for one video. So let's move on to sports? Listen, I don't know how to sports, unless it's NBA Jam or NFL Blitz, but a few games in the genre used voice control, so I guess I gotta suck it up and mention them. Unfortunately, there aren't any NFL virtual pet games in the vein of Seaman, but there are a few that use voice command. 2000s. Some notable entries include 2006's NFL head coach, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. You coach a team by verbally issuing plays, audibles, and Blue 42s. Is that a thing? Then there's NASCAR 06, Total Team Control, where you communicate with your virtual crew chief using your headset. I don't own either of these games, so I haven't actually played them. But if you have, let me know in the comments how they are. Now, onto something a little more in my wheelhouse: survival horror. 2003's PS2 game Lifeline presents a unique concept. It's a sci-fi survival horror game, except you don't actually control the main protagonist. Instead, you are stuck inside of a security booth, guiding the helpless cocktail waitress, Rio, with voice commands.
Go to save point.
The save point. Okay.
Lifeline pulls from the best of both worlds with its voice elements. It blends the relationship elements of Seaman with the command issuing style of everything else. You'll get to know Rio as she reveals more about herself and asks you questions as you progress.
Thanks for your help.
When you're not shooting the breeze with her, you'll have to guide her through exploration, puzzle solving, and combat, all of which are mildly frustrating, but still fun.
Dodge right. Tail, tail, tail.
Combat requires a surprising amount of strategy, maybe even more than EndWar. You have to call out which body parts Rio should aim for, as well as tell her when to dodge and heal. It can actually be a fairly intense experience. Lifeline's biggest issues lie with its other two elements: exploration and puzzle solving. There are tons of objects to interact with, and in order to do anything with them, you have to know exactly what to say.
Look at the suitcase.
The save point. Okay.
For example, it took me 5 minutes to figure out which term for suitcase the game would accept. I tried bag, luggage, purple suitcase, briefcase, you name it, until finally landing on the word trunk through dumb luck.
Finally.
Even still, Lifeline is a one-of-a-kind game that stands out as one of the best uses of voice control in video games, at least that I've played. A few more games in the horror action genre had voice features, just not utilized anywhere to the depth of Lifeline. Rockstar Games' 2003 murder simulator, Manhunt, has an optional microphone mode, where the mic isn't used to communicate, but rather to detect sounds. When turned on, this mode warns in-game enemies if any sounds occur within the space that you are playing, meaning real-world barking dogs, crying babies, or a creak in your house are a one-way ticket to entering alert mode. Over the years, some other games have implemented this same exact feature. More recently, Alien Isolation would alert the Hawking Xeno whenever there was a noise in your play space. It's a cool idea in concept, but unless you're playing in like a soundproof room or something, you're just gonna make things more difficult and annoying for yourself. Shortly after Lifeline, another Seaman-style virtual pet game was released, N.U.D.E. And that's Natural Ultimate Digital Experiment, of course. This Japan-only Xbox exclusive puts you in the role of a beta tester of a new humanoid robot.
21.
The game is very Japanese, so I can't really speak on it too much. But basically, just sub out Seaman for a bumbly android girl, pepper in a healthy dose of anime, and you've got N.U.D.E. Reviews of the game were mixed, with the game's vocabulary said to have been a bit too limited, especially when compared to Lifeline. At this point, we're getting into the end of the 2000s, and besides the never-ending onslaught of karaoke games, the voice control wave started to subside a little bit, until Microsoft released the Kinect. The Xbox 360 Kinect not only allowed abominations like this to exist, but it featured its own built-in speech recognition system, meaning that it was now much easier for developers to add voice control into their games. Now games like Skyrim, Dead Space 3, and even Halo Anniversary were able to implement voice commands. Games with complex inventory systems benefited immensely from this, by saving you several cumbersome trips to your menu with simple voice commands. This same trend continued into the next generation with the Xbox Xbox One, and it's bundled in Kinect 2.0, with over 30 games taking advantage of voice control on the system. Some standouts being Forza Horizon 2 with its Siri-like voice-activated Anna navigation system, and D4 Dark Dreams Don't Die, which allowed you to interrogate suspects by actually asking them questions. These voice innovations didn't stick around for long, since we all know how the Kinect bundled Xbox One was received.
Move this man!
Today, voice control is mainly reserved for standard UI navigation through console menus. Innovations with voice as a true means of control seem to have died off with the Xbox One. However, there have been some somewhat recent PC games to make clever use of the feature, like 2014's Bot Colony, an adventure game with no dialogue trees that instead builds its story based on what you say, and 2020's viral hit Phasmophobia, which detects real-world sounds that in-game ghosts can hear, as well as requiring you to ask specific questions to the game's spirit box. So was voice control a gimmick? Well, yes and no. Sure, some games hastily tacked on the feature just to add another selling point to the box art, but others presented creative and unique experiences that couldn't be done any other way. Not to mention the countless opportunities that voice control offers to gamers that may have a disability. I mean, thanks to voice recognition, you can play through Skyrim in its entirety without touching a single button. Though, for every potential benefit that voice control offers, I don't see it making a comeback anytime soon, even with modern technology. Voice is at its very essence a human characteristic, and until we have some Skynet levels of artificial intelligence to work with, it's always going to feel a bit frustrating and awkward. So there you have it. That's gaming's history with your voice. I know I didn't cover every single game or console out there to ever use the feature, but if my average watch time is any indication, you probably left 10 minutes ago anyway. Seriously though, thanks for watching, and if you liked the thing, hit the like. If you didn't, hit the dislike. Maybe leave a comment, let me know what your favorite voice control game was. Anyway, thanks again, and see you next time.
Game. Rats. Game.